Hi, I'm James Ward, a platform evangelist at Salesforce. I want to walk you through a quick way to get started with the Salesforce REST APIs and Java. So you can follow along. To get started, go to github.com/jamesward/quick-force-java. And this is a sample project that'll get you started with the force.com REST APIs. The first thing I'm going to do is deploy this on Heroku. So I can just hit this Deploy to Heroku button. And this will now allow me to create and deploy a new version of this application, this template, on Heroku. So it's going to take a minute to pull this application down, build it, and then deploy it on Heroku. The reason why I started with Heroku Deployment is because usually when we're working with the force.com APIs, we're going to need to have an application running somewhere, and Heroku is a great place to run these types of apps. This application is built with Play Framework and Java, and we'll go through the code in a few minutes once we set up our local development environment. So I'm going to fast forward through this part. It's going to take a couple minutes to download all the dependencies and then compile and deploy this application. I'll be back in just a sec. Alright, now that the application has been deployed, let's go check it out. The first thing that we're going to see in this application is some instructions to help us set up OAuth. Because we're using the force.com APIs, we'll typically use OAuth as a way to authorize a user to use the application. So we're going to follow these instructions. First thing we'll do is create a new connected app in Salesforce. We can give this any name and put in my email. Then I'm going to enable OAuth. Now I need some callback URLs. These are used for the OAuth process to authorize a user. So I'm going to just copy and paste those in there. And then I can select a OAuth scope. You could select any. I'm going to select the full scope and then hit save. And now it's telling me that this could take 2 to 10 minutes to complete the setup. So I'll hit continue, and that's now being provisioned. So while that's being provisioned, let's go back to the instructions, and you'll see that we now need to give some configuration settings to our app on Heroku. Let's go open up the application settings, and what I need to do is set some config vars for this application. The first one is going to be a consumer key, so I'm going to add in that key, and then I'm going to copy and paste the consumer key from my connected app and paste that in there. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the consumer secret. And then go copy and paste that. You should definitely keep these values secret. I'll definitely delete this connected app after I'm done with this demo so that they are not used wrongly. Okay, so the configuration settings are there. Let's go back to the instructions, and now it's telling me I just need to refresh this page. So when I refresh this page, it's now going to do the OAuth, or try to do the OAuth authorization to authorize me to use this application. You'll see that it's given me an error. This error means that the application, the connected application on Salesforce, is not completed being set up yet. So we need to give it that 2 to 10 minutes. And so we'll try this again in a couple minutes. So I'll fast forward until it's ready. Okay, let's give this a try again. I'm just going to refresh this page. And now you'll see that it's kicked off the OAuth flow, and it's saying foo is asking to access this information. I'm going to say allow. And then this application will redirect back to my app on Heroku. Now that my app on Heroku has gone through the authorization process, it can then make the REST API calls to Salesforce, fetch my accounts, and then display them there. Okay, so that's great. This is all working on the cloud. But the next step is to then load this application on the source code for the application onto my local machine so that I can do some local development on it, make some changes, test changes locally, and then deploy those changes up to Heroku again. So to do that, let's go back to the instructions back here on the GitHub page, and you'll see it saying go to this download Heroku source.herokuapp.com. This is a little Heroku app. All that it does is allow me to download the source code for any app that I have on Heroku. So once this comes up, we'll see a list of my apps on Heroku, and then I'll be able to download the source code for the app down to my local machine. You could, of course, also use Git as a source control tool around this and do that as well. Okay, so there's my app, the Protected Ocean one, and I'm going to click that. That will now download a zip file with the source code for my app. So let's open up Finder, go to my downloads directory, and there we go. There's that zip file. I'm just going to double click on that, extract it out, and now you'll see that there we go, we have the app source code. You could, of course, use command line to do this part, but I'm going to skip the command line and just launch everything with Finder. So if you're on Windows, you'll use the sbt.cmd, and since I'm on Mac, or if you're on Linux, we can just run this sbt script here. Sbt is the build tool that this project uses. So I'm going to, on Mac, control click on that and say open. And sure enough, I want to open it. And now it's going to run the build. When it runs the build, it's going to download some dependencies, download the Atom code editor, launch the application locally, and launch the Atom editor so I can make some changes. So this really bootstraps the full development environment that I need. The only thing that it doesn't have in there is Java. So you'll have to make sure that you have Java, and this requires Java 8. So have Java 8 installed on your system, but then you'll be all set to make some local changes. So there we go. Atom is now there, up and running, and the application is also running locally. So if I go back to my browser and I go to this localhost :9000, then this will run the application locally. So it's going to take a second to compile the source code, and then we should see the setup page that it'll take us to. While it's working on that, let's go back to the source code and walk through everything here. So starting at the top, the app directory is my main source directory. You'll see that I have an application.java. I have some server-side templating, some configuration files here. Project is just some metadata about the build. Public is where I put in any public assets, static assets, images, and those sorts of things. App.json is used by Heroku and the Heroku button for that deployment. Build.sbt is my build definition file, which defines my dependencies and any plugins and things that I have, and then the SBT stuff. So that's the basic structure of the project. Let's go back, and looks like our application is now up and running, but I do need to tell my local running application about my OAuth settings. So what I need to do is create a new file in the conf directory called local.conf, and then I need to put in those consumer key and consumer secret values there into this. So let's go over to the editor. And then I'm going to, in the conf directory, create a new file, and we'll call this one local.conf. I'm going to paste in that. Make sure you never put this configuration file in your SCM. You don't want those secrets in your source control system. So let's copy those values again, this time over into our local configuration. And same thing for the secret. So when I save that file, then I should be able to just go back to the instructions for the local application. It says refresh this page. So let's give it a try. So now when I refresh this page, it's going to go through the OAuth flow. I've already authorized this foo application to make API calls on my behalf. So you'll see that now running locally, the app works and it's making REST API calls up to Salesforce. So that's great. Now let's make a quick little change to this application and then redeploy that change. So what I'm going to do is go into Atom. And there's a couple places that I want to make a change. I want to remove a column from that application. So the first place I'm going to do that is in the index page. The index page is just a server-side template. Let's remove the rating column here. And then in the application.java, let's also go remove rating from a few places. I'm going to remove it from my account value object, and then I'm also going to remove it from the query. Okay, so that all looks good. Let's now save that file and save the template file. Then when I go back to my browser, I can just hit refresh on this local app, and then it's going to recompile and then redo the OAuth. And then here we go. We see that it's now re-rendered that, and I no longer have that account column. So that was a pretty simple change, but it gives you an idea of I want to make some changes locally and test those changes locally. And then the next step is to deploy those changes onto Heroku. I can do that within Atom. You could also use the Git tooling and Git push to Heroku or GitHub integration. but I'm going to show you how to do it with Atom and the Heroku plugin that's here. So in this Heroku menu, first time you use it, you'll see login, so you need to log in to Heroku. But then I can just hit deploy. It's going to load my applications. I only have this one in my demo account. So now I can select that, and it's going to upload the source code for this application up to Heroku. And then Heroku will build this application. I can go check out the build output here in the Heroku dashboard. You'll see that there's an activity item with a build log, and you can watch this application build. It should build faster now the second time, since it has all the dependencies, and then it will deploy that change on Heroku, and we'll be able to go check out that change in the app running on Heroku. I'm going to fast forward through this build part. It'll take about a minute or so to do it. So I'll be back in a second. Okay, so the build is finished and this new version has been deployed. So let's go back to the app on Heroku, this Protected Ocean one, and let's refresh this page. This should now have the new version, and you'll see that once I refresh, it goes through the OAuth, and then now that change that I just tested locally is now live, up and running on my app on Heroku. So that was it. That's how easy it is to get started with a Java application that connects to Force.com's REST APIs. And if you want to get started, again, just go to github.com/jamesward/quick-force-java, and the steps are all right there for you to walk through. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.